I am a lifelong Democrat, a mom of 5 boys, and a lesbian. I am also the public whistleblower from a pediatric gender center. I cared for nearly 1,500 unique patients from the age of 3 until the age of 26. I worked in pediatric gender medicine for nearly 5 years, and I was once a true believer. Not just believer in the use of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery, but also in this idea of gender identity itself. I became a whistleblower because we were harming patients. I can address what I have seen in your questions. I now run a national LGBT organization called the Courage Coalition. Today, I'm not going to speak directly about all of the harms that I saw with these interventions. Many others will. Instead, I want to speak directly to the Democrats about building dams. From one lifelong liberal to another, and why your constitutional change of SJ 35 is the building of a dam. Picture Lake Okeechobee in Florida, and what cutting off that natural water flow did to the Everglades, and how we are still trying to repair that damage. Picture the Grand Coulee Dam, which flooded native peoples' designated lands and decimated the salmon population. What this dam that you are proposing to do is going to do to communities like mine, the lesbian community that exists because we are same-sex attracted. When you build this dam, you will decimate our population like dams do to salmon, downstream effects that you cannot imagine. We fought for, bled for, died for the rights of gay men and lesbian women to be welcome into the fabric that upholds our society. If you do this, know that we will throw our bodies at it, like the salmon at dams. We see the downstream effects in Australia. They did similar, and now they have lawsuits, and now there is no longer the legal right for lesbians to publicly meet. If you are okay with destroying my community, at least own it and be willing to say it out loud publicly. The downstream effect is also happening in New York State. They are dealing with the fallout, as they did similarly as what you have proposed. The UK ban of puberty blockers after a 4-year systematic review has just taken shape. Now is not the time to enshrine into your Constitution, as the science itself is telling us that these medical interventions are being questioned internationally. I am a Democrat because I believe that we care about the long term. We care not about just flooding native lands and decimating salmon. We care about medical evidence. We care about systematic reviews of evidence, and we care about understanding what the long-term downstream effects will be before we act. We care about each other, and if you still care, then do not build this dam and do not pass SJ 35.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your testimony. Are there questions from members of the committee? Representative Mastro Francesco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jamie, thank you so much for your testimony. Your testimony is actually very interesting coming from the lesbian community, because we always hear that, we always assume that there's a certain communities that are in favor of a lot of things that we actually do in this building. But particularly when it comes to this HJ 35, when it talks about gender identity, putting this enshrined into our Constitution, it really concerns me. I am fearful that should this pass, that it would open up the floodgates to us preventing the protection of our children when it comes to gender affirming care, which you kind of touched on a little bit. But I'm curious as to your experience with the gender affirming care, and how has it affected you? Just a little bit about the science that so we was here to talk about science here, right? What type of well, let me just ask you this question. There does come a point where someone is transitioning, and then there does come a point where they want to detransition. Maybe the procedure didn't work for them. They realized in their lifetime that this is not for them. Can you kind of give me some percentages, and at what age kids actually realize that maybe this was the wrong path to them? Because again, as we talk about this HJ 35 being put into the Constitution, right? This HJ 35, did I say SJ? HJ 35, but being put into the Constitution, it would prevent us from making any type of a law to prevent that from happening. So I just wanted to kind of get your take on it, if you wouldn't mind. Through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the question. So I worked in pediatric gender medicine for close to 5 years. What we have seen shift in that period of time is that internationally there are systematic reviews of evidence that are demonstrating to us that these are questionable treatments at best. About a week and a half ago in Canada, there was a systematic review of evidence of puberty blockers. It found there to be no good evidence for the continued use of that intervention in minors. They did the same with a study of cross-sex hormones. Again, found no good evidence to support that use. The United Kingdom did a 4-year intensive study, including multiple systematic reviews of evidence. They have subsequently completely banned the use of puberty blockers in the entirety of the UK. These are treatments that started at their core in homophobia. The very first group of kids that were tested on this protocol, called the Dutch protocol, there were 70 children. 68 of those children were same-sex attracted. One of those children died as a result. These treatments are being questioned everywhere, and to make a permanent change in your constitution right now would be directly against what we are seeing in the medical community, questioning this globally. In terms of those who are detransitioning, in my center alone, we had a 30% dropout rate. We had 30% of the kids started on these treatments ceasing. I had patients contact me immediately after reporting that this was not the right path and they were sped through and harmed. I had a 19-year-old had a double bilateral mastectomy. She called us within 3 months begging to have her breasts put back on.
Thank you for that. And, you know, I look at this issue and I always say, you know, everybody should be treated equally. I don't really care how people live. Obviously, people are free citizens to do what they want. I do get concerned when it's harmful, obviously, to children. And a lot of times when these issues come before us, the argument that we hear is that we need to prevent suicide. Children are suicidal because of the way they feel and so forth. Do you have any statistics or data on that argument when it comes to suicide?
Yes, and I've also seen a lot of members of the ACLU here directly. The ACLU had Chase Strangio, a transgender man, represent them in front of the United States Supreme Court. Chase Strangio told the United States Supreme Court that we are operating under a myth of suicide. There is a myth narrative being used, and it will be propagated to here today, that if you do not give children puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgery, that they will commit suicide. The ACLU admitted to the Supreme Court that is not true. It is a myth, and it is being sold to you as a reason why you need to continue to do these things. What we've actually seen in some data is that individuals post-op have some of the higher rates of suicidal ideations. There is a true mental health catastrophe in this country, especially amongst young people, but the treatment pathway forward is not to arrest someone's puberty, it's not to give them wrong sex hormones, and it's not to cut off their body parts.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, just one more question. I'm sure other people may have questions. You mentioned in the beginning that you were one of the first whistleblowers. I guess, how did it come to that? What made you change your theory on this gender-affirming care?
That's an excellent question. First of all, I'm not the only whistleblower globally. If anyone in this room is supporting this and have not heard of the Tavistock Clinic in the UK, you are actually missing a huge part of the evidence about what is going on internationally. The Tavistock was the gender clinic in the United Kingdom, and I am one of multitudes of whistleblowers. Most of us are gays and lesbians coming forward and saying, we are hurting proto-gay kids with these interventions. I became a whistleblower, first of all, because I saw the immense harms that were happening because of these interventions. Second of all, I saw that these medical providers internally do not know why they are doing this and why there is no evidence to do so. I had one provider say that this was treating a mental health condition called gender dysphoria. I had another doctor tell me he did not care if you had a mental health condition. If you claim that you are trans, you are trans. They were allowing children to essentially self-prescribe and self-diagnose. This is not just what happened in my clinic. My clinic followed the WPATH guidelines and the Endocrine Society guidelines. Both of those are guidelines that are being called out right now internationally as being basically circular, because one says so, the other agrees, because they agree, the other one says so. These interventions are harming proto-gay kids, vulnerable kids, kids with autism, with trauma, with sexual abuse, and I guarantee you, if you look into your own state's foster care system, you are going to find huge numbers of harmed children who have been sucked into this as well. We also saw a true social contagion come out of COVID lockdowns, come out of social media use, and we now also see huge numbers of kids, primarily girls, who have been sucked into this, who are being transitioned, and they are some of the first ones telling us, they're screaming at us like canaries in the coal mine, stop doing this, you are harming children.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. I want to thank you for your testimony, and I think it's really important. You know, we talk about changing our Constitution, and when people read the language, they think it does no harm. But believe it or not, it's always good to hear what could actually happen when our Constitution is changed, the unintended consequences and the effects that it could have on lives. So I think it's very important, and I really thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Jamie, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you making the trip to share your testimony with us. Just a couple of follow-ups on your conversation through you, Madam Chairman. You've spoken a lot of generalizations, and I think you probably have a lot of detail you could share with us also. So when it comes to parents and children being given information about the harms of puberty blockers or surgery or various hormone treatments, stuff like that. Can you just get into that a little bit more about some specifics about what you've seen? It's one thing to say it's harmful, but another thing to kind of point out an example of something that happened. Through you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for the question. So first off, I think we should go back to that myth of suicide. So one of the things that is being told to parents directly into doctors' offices is that it is better for them to give their children these interventions. We specifically told parents, would you rather have a dead son or a living daughter? This is not the way that you provide informed consent for treatments for anything medical. In terms of the actual risks, benefits, side effects, the biggest issue we have right now is we do not have long-term outcome data, especially regarding pubertal blockade. We have seen some studies starting to come out that when you arrest puberty or stop puberty at Tanner stage 3, which is what the Dutch protocol set out to do, we are finding that we are actually arresting brain development in these crucial stages. We see that there might be long-term impacts on IQ. We know that there are long-term impacts on things like bone health, and we also know directly from WPATH itself that arresting the development of a boy at Tanner stage 3 or 2 will lead to their lifetime infertility and the loss of sexual function. Children do not have the ability to consent to be sterilized, and I don't believe that it is legal for parents to consent to sterilize their children either. That is the known long-term outcome. You don't have to listen to me for it. WPATH's own surgeons admit this publicly. If you arrest a young natal boy's development and go on to cross-sex hormones, their penis will never develop, their testicles will never be allowed to make sperm, they will be rendered infertile and lose their sexual function for life. That is not medicine, and that should not be occurring in any state, and it absolutely should not be enshrined in any state's constitution.
Thank you for that answer. Through you, Madam Chairman. Wow, it's very kind of somewhat shocking, but also very informative, what you're sharing with us today. I just, we have limited experience on some of these topics. It's one of the side effects of being in the legislature is that, you're elected to go serve on all these various committees, and we talk about bills on everything across the spectrum. And I mean, some things might seem, normal, like, transportation and street signs, and, it should be pretty easy, but there are experts in all of these areas, and we're not experts. I'm a real estate agent, so, getting in the realm of gender surgery is just something like, I'm wading into some very hot water, and it's not a comfortable place. And for me, I do my job I come from the do no harm philosophy of things, and I guess that's my concern about this bill overall. And I want to just ask your thoughts on that. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the constitutional amendment language, but it reads pretty clearly that it's going to protect anyone involved in getting into any aspect of gender reassignment. And what you're describing to me is that, there's a lot of not settled science about how it happens, the process. Even if somebody was to suggest it was a viable option, there's no set way that it's done that is accepted. So this would protect somebody who's doing completely bad or horrible or just completely incompetent things. Can you just speak to me about your thoughts about where this type of societal issue intersects with government? I'm sure you have an opinion on that because you are clearly an expert. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, thank you for that question. So this bill actually does use the phrase in there, healthcare. It is talking about the provisions of healthcare, and it is enshrining into constitutional law something that is currently right now one of the most debated medical topics in the world. This is not a partisan issue. The debate right now is over systematic reviews of evidence. Some of the countries that we look to for all of our liberal values are some of the first countries that are rolling this back. Finland, Sweden, the UK. That is because there is a huge global debate right now over these provisions of interventions. It would be grossly inappropriate for any state to enshrine these provisions into a constitution. I am an expert. I have a master's of science in clinical research. I have run clinical research studies. The other thing that I will warn your committee of is one of the reasons why I became a public whistleblower is because I watched the doctors that I work with go to a body exactly like yours and directly lie. The doctors I worked with told the legislative body in Missouri that there were no surgeries happening in minors. They said that directly after I saw surgical scars from top surgeries in clinic in minor patients. Please know that the doctors that are testifying on behalf of this are biased. Often it is their own income that is at stake. They are often the ones making money off of these treatments. They do not want their income stream to be tied up, and so they will come and tell you things that are blatantly not true. The United Kingdom's CAS report was a 4-year study with multiple systematic reviews of evidence. There is nothing partisan about this topic. The only partisan thing is that I'm devastated that the Democratic Party is not willing to at least look at the global body of evidence. And honestly, to all of my Republicans who are now my friends, I am not a Republican. This is very hard for me to work with you all, but I cannot get the Democrats to be willing to even look at systematic reviews of evidence coming out of Northern European liberal countries. We are in the upside down right now. I honestly can't even get your Democratic legislators to look me in the eye right now.
Through Madam Chairman, thank you very much for sharing that. I guess just another quick question, which is, and Representative Master Francesco. Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you again, Senator. We're having another safety issue in the room, so if you do not have a seat, there are open seats. Please find one. Otherwise, there's an overflow room in room 2D. If you are not waiting to testify because you are next or you do not have a seat, please sit down or go to room 2D. Thank you. Sorry, Senator.
No problem. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
If folks have questions about logistics in the room, they can see the committee staff over here in the direction I'm pointing in, my left, your right. Senator Sampson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. My understanding is that the video was down for a little while, but they fixed it. I don't know if it's fixed or not. It's not fixed. Not up to me to stop the meeting, though. Unfortunately, that's up to the chairman. Okay. Anyway, just to follow up, Jamie, I apologize. You had a brief conversation with Representative Mastro Francesco, and she mentioned people that detransition. And this is very interesting to me because I do have some experience with that. I've had a couple of constituents reach out to me and express, changes that happened in their life where they had transitioned early on and later on they changed their mind. I'm just, if you could speak to it, I mean, is that common? Does it happen a lot? And what kind of complications does that lead to for those individuals in their life? Through you, Madam Chairman.
The process of detransition is devastating, and it leads to a huge sense of mourning for those who have been incorrectly brought down this pathway. So currently, we do not know the correct percentages. We saw one study come out of the military system called TRICARE, where it looked like up to 30% of those initiating treatments were ceasing transitioning at some point. In terms of what I'm seeing across the country, your state is in the middle of trying to enshrine this treatment into its constitution. I am working in states that are trying to expand the statute of limitation for private action for those who have been harmed. So currently, in most states, you have 1 to 2 years in order to sue or seek justice for your medical harm. Most people who go on to detransition begin to do so at 8 to 12 years post-transition. It often takes that long for them to get to the point of mourning and understanding what has been done to their physical bodies. I am still devastated to know that there are still states in this country that are moving in one direction, while most of the country, and honestly most of the globe, is moving in the opposite direction, trying to figure out a way to find justice and care for this huge medical experiment that has gone so vastly wrong across the globe. Detransitioners deserve the right to private action, to sue for their harms. They have the right to medical care. There are no current ICD-10 codes that they can even seek care in most places. We are seeing the tip of the iceberg on one of the largest medical catastrophes in our country starting to play out.
Thank you, Jamie, and through you, Madam Chairman. I just want to thank you for being here today. The information that you've shared is extraordinary, and especially coming from someone in your background who's actually worked in a hospital setting around these very surgeries we're discussing. It means a lot to me to hear the inside story which you provide, which we don't get very much. I mean, really, we're subject to political banter more than anything, not actual science and not actual experience with people on the ground who are impacted. There's a lot of distractions in the room with the repair of our video and so forth. It's hard to concentrate in here, and I apologize to you and to the other people in the room for that. But I just wanted to thank you once again for your testimony. It was very informative to me, and it will certainly help me going forward. The idea of having a opportunity to expand the statute of limitations for people to have action sounds like a really good amendment to this, which I'll consider going forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Are there other questions from members of the committee? Representative Hoxa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question through you. So, I would assume are a resident of Connecticut now. Is that correct? For
No,
you?
so, sorry,
No. Yep. Go ahead.
you can finish your question.
That was my question.
No, I'm not a resident of Connecticut. I am currently a resident of St. Louis, Missouri. However, being one of the only whistleblowers in the United States to have legal recognition, I do believe that my information, especially considering that every single center in the U.S. is relying on 3 of the exact same protocols, is incredibly relevant across the country. Every single pediatric center is relying on WPATH, standard of care, the Endocrine Society guideline, and a position paper from the American Academy of Pediatrics written by Jason Rafferty. We use those documents. Every single center in your state is using the same, so the information that I have is universal across the United States.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you. That's very important for the people listening at home and for the audience here to know that your experience in St. Louis, Missouri, also is very relevant to the subject matter through this proposed amendment here today. Do you happen to know if Connecticut is a particular is an example of a state where there is particular sort of a mishandling from your view of this issue by the medical community? Is it especially egregious in the state of Connecticut based off of your professional opinion and what you have seen while in the state or observed from from your position in the medical community? Is Connecticut a particularly egregious example of some of these mishappenings or mishandlings of this issue? Through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that question. So what we see now in a large swath of the northeastern states and then the West Coast is that there are clinics who are, first of all, acting as beacons or sanctuaries from across the country. So your state is one of those. So what that means is if there is a parent situation where one parent, and often this is the dads who are asking for longer term therapeutic interventions instead of medical interventions to occur, we are seeing families be torn apart over this, especially if there was already a custody agreement. We are seeing parents physically take their children out of their families and bring them to states like yours to be put on a permanent medical pathway, when oftentimes the other parent is simply asking for more time, more therapy, and to slow down. The other thing that we are seeing in the data coming out from the insurance billing and coding is that states like yours are also lying in coding. And so in the center that I worked in and across the country, there is a way to code a patient as a transgender patient. It is an F64 code. There's also a way to code a patient as an endocrine condition non-specified. That is a way to hide that patient, to still medicalize that patient in a way that does not truly give you the numbers for how many patients are being medicalized in your state. What we have seen out of some of the insurance billing and coding is that there are numbers of children in your states who have been given puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries as minors. And also, please remember, as these things are pulling apart across our country, more and more children are going to be ripped out of their families and brought here specifically to be given these interventions that we do not see working with the evidence.
Thank you very much for that. And through you, Madam Chair, one last question. Given the recent changing of administrations on the federal level and any order or anticipated order or legislation to come out of Washington, Do you think that compliance in the state of Connecticut will be an issue with any supposed, or as we see right now with President Trump's, recent executive order going along those lines? Do you think that we'll have an issue here in Connecticut with any federal law that would preempt any sort of state law or a proposed amendment such as this one? Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, we actually see this playing out right this moment in New York State. So New York State passed a very similar constitutional amendment enshrining gender identity, very similar into their state law. The federal executive order has essentially told hospitals you need to pause what you're doing and stop these interventions that are harming people, or else you will lose federal funding. The Attorney General in the state of New York sent out a letter to those hospitals, and we are essentially going to see huge, costly litigations. Your state should seriously look at how much this is going to cost you, because if you enshrine this into law, you will be sued backwards and forwards, because your attorney general is going to say the state constitution says one thing and the federal executive order says the other thing. And the other thing that's even more serious, this is not partisan. Forget the executive order. When you enshrine this into law and the entire world comes to realize that you have been harming children, you will have a constitutional crisis, because you will not be able to stop something that the globe is telling us. Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, Finland, Sweden, the globe is telling us, stop doing this to children. You will put yourself into the most expensive crisis that you don't want to see. And if you haven't already figured out how much that is going to cost before you do this, I think it's a real true problem for your constituents to know what you are getting them into.